tell you about what happened last summer as I was driving across town on East 37th Street in New York City. I was coming from the airport where I had picked up my cousin from London. He was going to visit us for a few weeks. Exiting from the Midtown Tunnel and heading west, I was in the middle of the block between 3rd Avenue and Lexington Avenue when the light at the corner turned red. I stopped the car and waited. On my right was a garbage truck. The garbage man had just emptied a garbage can into the back of the truck. As I was conversing with my cousin, I noticed from the corner of my eye that the man then reached into the truck and pulled out a shiny metal object. I looked directly at what he was holding in his hands and saw that it was a brass Chanukah menorah. My mind raced. Signaling to my cousin to roll down the window, I called out, "Sir, that object you are holding in your hand is a religious object that belongs in a Jewish place." The garbage man came closer to the car and said, "Someone has just thrown this out. Probably belonged to some old person." Again, I said, trying not to sound too eager, though speaking hurriedly. "But it's a religious object that should be in a synagogue, perhaps." "Would you give it to me, so I could give it to someone to use for the holiday time, or so I could bring it to a synagogue?" He examined the menorah, as though weighing it in both hands and mind, perhaps realizing that it might have some value, or that it might serve as a nice candle holder for his home. The lights changed. Horns were beginning to sound, so I felt I had to move on. What else could I say? Would there be enough time to explain the mitzvah of returning this menorah to its proper use? How much money could I offer so he would sell it to me? Should I pull in front of his truck and plead my case more strongly? In the quickness of the moment, I just couldn't think fast enough. Suddenly, in my mind's eye, with a rush of memory, I was standing in my Bubby and Zadie's apartment, and together we were celebrating Chanukah. My Bubby and Zadie came from the old country. When I was a child, I heard how they had come here to America, to a new country, a young country, and I decided they must have thrown out the old country, as if they had used it up or worn it out, like a neighbour who had thrown out the welcome mat because another neighbour had worn it out. We had a mat in front of our door with the word welcome on it, and it never seemed to wear out. Maybe I was Cosmo. It was all very puzzling for a little girl. Maybe my grandparents and the rest of their big family had to leave Russia because there was no more room for anyone else. Why else would people leave their home, the place where they grew up, where their friends were? It certainly was confusing to me. But at that time, I didn't know the right questions to ask to better understand the immigration of the Jews and the reasons why they had left their old home. However, as I grew older, I became better at asking questions. I asked, "What's an old country? And which old country? And what did they do with the old country? And could they make it new again?" I heard them talking about how a country has a soul. So I said they could make it new by repairing the soles, like on a pair of shoes. "What do children know about such things?" said my parents. "When you grow up, you'll understand more. You'll have a cycle, and then you'll ask," they would add, patiently smiling. "Wisdom must come automatically when you grow up," I reasoned. "But what age is grown up?" I persisted. They never could answer the question to my satisfaction. All they would tell me is, "You are grown up when you have a cycle." My Bubby had a few things she had brought with her from her old home. She had several silver candlesticks, some gigantic feather quilts and pillows stuffed with goose feathers that she and her mother themselves plucked, and a menorah for Chanukah. The menorah was made from brass. It looked like a tree composed of 4 pairs of open arms. I loved that menorah. Every Chanukah, Bubby would take it down from the big glass cabinet, along with a smaller menorah for me, and place them on the table in front of the big window of her dining room, a room that faced the elevated railroad tracks on Park Avenue at the corner of 104th Street in New York City. Their 3rd floor apartment, called a railroad apartment, probably because it was long like a railroad car, was in a brownstone at 101 Park Avenue. This was a section of the city called Harlem, and in the 1930s and 1940s, many Jews lived there. Whenever a train rumbled by, everyone felt the vibrations and heard the noise. While the Chanukah candles were lit, their flames would dance even faster than usual just for those few seconds. And when that happened, I can imagine myself that it was Elijah walking by with his big cape flapping in the wind, causing the vibrations and checking to see if I had lit the candles and if I was watching them until they had melted down and went out. Bubby had always told me that it is a mitzvah to watch the candles once they are lit. Remember, she would say in her Russian Yiddish accent, it is important to remember that watching the candles is part of the celebration of Chanukah with all its miracles. The little flames add joy and light. They give us a message from thousands of years ago. They are saying that once there is light, you will never accept darkness again. So my Malkala, do not leave the room while the candles are burning, because otherwise, if you leave the room and leave the candles alone, you will shame them. That's how Bubby spoke, always with a lesson, always with a proverb, always with the faith and beliefs of the Jewish people. Bubby could never have been a child like me. She was always a wise woman with plenty of cycle. I was sure of that. What I also liked about being in Bubby's house during Chanukah were the latkes she made. They are so delicious, Bubby, even better than my mother's, I would shout with a laugh, reaching for my 10th, or was it my 12th latke? Shah, shah, my Malkala, my Bubby would answer. Your mama makes her latkes just like I do. She learned from me. But your mama is more modern than I am, and knows how to cook better than me. But I would only smile and shake my head and hug my Bubby tighter. I also loved the stories Bubby told. Whenever she was about to tell me a story, she would take off her flowered apron. My Bubby loved roses, so the apron had big roses all over it. Sit in her favourite big cushioned chair near the menorah, and motion me to come sit next to her. One Chanukah, when I was very young, Bubby said, I will tell you a story by Yehuda Leib Peretz, one of the great Yiddish writers. She explained that she had heard this story in the old country. I heard the story when I was young, and this is how I remember it. Well, you see, she would start, there was once a couple who lived happily together. They were poor but happy. And when it came time for Chanukah, they would take out their brass Chanukah lamp from its glass case and light the candles while they recited the blessings. That's how it was, for years. What did the menorah look like, Bubby? Well, it had one twisted leg, there were brass birds and trees, and a big lion with its mouth open. Maybe it was laughing. On Chanukah, even a lion is happy, she would say with a laugh that made the wrinkles on her face even deeper. Then she would continue. And Shlomi Zalman, that was the husband's name, one day found some kind of iron in the street. When he arrived home, he cleaned the iron, and underneath he saw that it was made of gold. So now he was a rich man. Well, they changed their name, they changed the way they dressed, they changed their address, and the children also changed schools to go to a fancy private school. No more yeshivas. They sold everything they owned and bought fancy French high-toned antiques. They even gave away their holy books. But the circles keep turning, and after a few years, they were no longer so rich. Things went from bad to worse. No use going into detail, but they could no longer afford the things they had been used to. Meanwhile, their sons were in schools in another country, in England, far away. Now, when this couple were poor again, they remembered that they were Jews. So Shlomi Zalman went to shul again. And when it was time for Chanukah, they remembered their old brass menorah. They searched everywhere for it, hoping that maybe they hadn't thrown it away. In a corner near the stove, or maybe it was on top of the stove, they found it. Oh, they were so happy to see it, like a good old friend. They cleaned it and recited the blessings and lit the candles. They felt lighter in their hearts. One evening, the doorbell rang, and when they went to the door, standing there was an old furniture dealer they knew. Excuse me for disturbing you so late at night, but there is an Englishman who is an antique dealer, and he is looking for things to buy. Since I bought old furniture from you, perhaps you still have some old things. Standing behind the dealer was a man who looked like a Graf, a nobleman. So Shlomi Zalman invited them both in. As soon as the Englishman saw the Chanukah menorah, he said he wanted to buy it. How much do you want for that brass object? He asked. and Shlomi Zalman didn't know what to answer. He looked at his wife. She gave him the answer, but only with her eyes, and a slight shake of her head from side to side. But he knew what she meant. No, no thank you. We cannot accept your offer, because it is Chanukah, and we must light the candles each night. This is a menorah that we have had for a long time. There must be a reason why we kept it, even when we didn't use it for a few years. Soon after that night, things began to turn good again for this couple. Many years have gone by, and my Bubby and Zadie have died. I don't know what happened to my Bubby's Bubby's menorah. Suddenly, I knew that the menorah rescued from the garbage truck had reminded me of my Bubby's menorah. The car horns were deafening. Going with my impulse, I pulled in front of the garbage truck, got out of my car, reached into my pocketbook at the same time, took out a large bill, and handed it to the man holding the menorah, hoping he would sell it to me. No, no, lady, I couldn't take any money for it. I'm a religious man myself. This is a Jewish candlestick, is it? Then you take it, and you give it to someone who needs it, and will use it. Good luck, and God bless you, lady. With a wave of his hand, he handed me the menorah and jumped onto the back of the garbage truck, smiling his great big smile. Every year, that menorah, the menorah rescued on 37th Street, brings to mind the menorahs of my childhood, the one at Bubby's house, the one in her story. Did that discarded menorah really belong to an old person? Then who would have thrown it away? Maybe that person died and someone had come to clean out the apartment. Oh, perhaps you want to know what happened to that menorah. I brought it to my rabbi, and he gave it to a young couple who had just arrived from Soviet Russia to make a new life for themselves in America.